Hello everyone. I, Jnaneshwara TN, Assistant Professor of English, welcome you to today's lecture. Today, we are going to explore the life and work of one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, George Orwell. We will delve into his fascinating background, his ideological convictions, and finally take a closer look at one of his most powerful essays, Shooting an Elephant. Let us begin with the man behind the name. George Orwell was not his real name. He was born Eric Arthur Blair in 1903 in Motihari in the Bengal Presidency of British India, what is now Bihar. He later adopted the pen name George Orwell, a name that today is virtually synonymous with clarity, political insight, and moral courage. Orwell's father, Richard Walmesley Blair, worked in the Opium Department of Indian Civil Service, a detail that hints at Orwell's early connection to British imperialism, a theme he would later critique fiercely. At the age of just one, Orwell was taken to England by his mother. Though his family belonged to what they called the lower upper middle class, they were not wealthy. Nevertheless, young Eric was academically gifted. In 1916, he won a scholarship to one of England's top public schools. However, due to financial limitations, university education wasn't an option. Instead, his parents made a practical decision. They encouraged him to join the imperial police. And so, at age 19, he passed the entrance exam and was posted to Burma, modern day Myanmar, where his maternal grandmother lived. Between 1922 and 1927, Orwell served as a British officer in Burma. This experience, watching the workings of imperialism from the inside, left a profound mark on him. Disillusioned with empire and all it stood for, he resigned from the police force and returned to England determined to become a writer. Orwell's path as a writer was not easy. For years, he lived in near poverty, working as a teacher, a bookseller's assistant, and even living as a tramp to understand life on the margins. These experiences informed his early works like Down and Out in Paris and London. In 1937, he traveled to Spain to report on the Spanish Civil War, where he was injured and further radicalized against authoritarian regimes, both fascist and communist. During World War II, Orwell lived in London. He worked for the BBC and contributed to Tribune, a socialist newspaper. It was during this time that his most famous works emerged. In 1945, he published Animal Farm, a brilliant satire that criticized the Soviet Union's descent into totalitarianism. The book brought him international fame. Only a few years later, in 1950, Orwell died at the young age of 46 due to tuberculosis. Despite his short life, his legacy is enduring. In 2008, The Times named him the second greatest British writer since 1945. George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant first appeared in 1936 during a period when the British Empire still held significant colonial control over parts of Asia and Africa. Orwell draws directly from his personal experience as a British colonial officer in Burma, giving the essay historical and political relevance. The time of its publication adds to its impact. It captures a first hand critique of imperialism at a time when such criticism was not mainstream. The piece functions as a narrative essay, a blend of personal storytelling and political commentary. Orwell recounts a special incident involving a rogue elephant, using it as a metaphor for the larger imperial system. His storytelling is vivid and gripping, making the essay feel immediate and emotionally resonant. The personal nature of the narrative allows readers to connect deeply with Orwell's internal conflict. Orwell's writing is known for its clarity and honesty, and Shooting an Elephant is no exception. He doesn't obscure his thoughts behind flowery language. Instead, he uses a clear and direct style to reflect on his own complicity in a system he despised. The essay's tone is reflective, and Orwell doesn't shy away from portraying his own weakness, confusion, and shame. The central event of the essay, a colonial officer shooting an elephant, symbolizes the moral compromises imperial powers make to preserve authority. Orwell doesn't want to shoot the elephant, but he does so because he feels pressured by the expectations of the local Burmese population. He recognizes that his authority is a performance and that performance demands cruelty even when it's unnecessary. This moment becomes a turning point in his understanding of power. Orwell uses this event to unpack the ethical dilemmas faced by those enforcing colonial rule. He is torn between his personal sense of right and wrong and the role he is expected to play. The inner conflict mirrors the broader contradictions of imperialism, where the colonizers are often imprisoned by the very power they wield. The essay reveals how imperialism corrupts both the rulers and the ruled. The essay ultimately portrays the empire as a system built on illusions. Orwell, supposedly the figure of authority, realizes he is not in control at all. He acts not out of conviction but out of fear of being laughed at, fear of seeming weak. This reversal of power, where the colonizer is manipulated by the colonized, is presented as both ironic and tragic, emphasizing the absurdity of the imperial project. More than just a personal confession, Orwell's essay invites readers to interrogate broader systems of power, domination, and conformity. It's not only a critique of colonialism, but a commentary on how institutions, political or social, can coerce individuals into betraying their own values. By sharing his own moral failure, Orwell asks us to reflect on how we respond to similar pressures in our own lives. George Orwell, born Eric Arthur Blair, served as a sub-divisional police officer in British ruled Burma. The town of Moulmein, where the essay is set, was part of this colonial territory. It's here that Orwell found himself caught in the midst of a growing anti European sentiment among the Burmese people. Despite the calm exterior of colonial rule, the resentment toward British imperialists was seething. As Orwell writes, The hatred for Europeans was bitter, but it was also silent. The Burmese lacked the power to rebel openly. Instead, their resistance took on small but stinging forms. The people showed their anger in subtle but humiliating ways. If a European woman walked alone through the bazaar, she could expect to have Beetlejuice pat on her dress, a deeply disrespectful act. As a British officer, Orwell was an easy and obvious target. During a football match, a local man deliberately tripped him and the crowd roared with laughter. These moments stung not just physically but emotionally. The Burmese jeered and mocked Europeans from a safe distance. Even the young Buddhist monks, who should have been symbols of peace, stood on corners and sneered at every white man passing by. These experiences affected Orwell deeply. He began to hate his job, not because of the physical danger, but because of the moral conflict it caused. He had come to realize that imperialism was evil. He saw himself as part of a system that oppressed and humiliated the very people he sympathized with. Yet, here is where Orwell's genius lies in his honesty. While he sided with Burmese in his mind, he also hated them at times. Their constant mockery made him feel angry, helpless, and ashamed. He felt stuck between his guilt as an agent of the empire and his rage against those who despised him. Orwell's dilemma was not unique. It was, in his words, a byproduct of imperialism. The British Empire, though outwardly powerful, was already rotting from within. Orwell didn't yet realize that younger empires would soon replace the British Raj. The prisons were filthy, the rule was brutal, and yet he had to enforce it. It was the dirty work of empire, and he was its unwilling tool. This hypocrisy, hating the empire while enforcing its laws, caused Orwell deep psychological conflict. In Shooting an Elephant, Orwell captures the emotional complexity of the colonial experience. He simultaneously sees the British Raj as an unbreakable tyranny and yet admits he would have been glad to drive a bayonet into a Buddhist priest's guts. This is the painful contradiction of imperialism. It doesn't just destroy the oppressed, it corrupts the oppressor too. The anti European feeling of the Burmese, as shown in Orwell's essay, wasn't just hatred, it was the quiet voice of a people stripped of power, dignity, and justice. And Orwell, torn between duty and conscience, reveals how colonialism damages everyone it touches, both the rulers and the ruled. The incident begins early one morning when a sub inspector from a police station on the other side of the town calls the narrator. He urgently reports that an elephant is ravaging the bazaar, destroying property, endangering lives, and creating panic. The narrator, though hesitant, mounts a pony and takes with him an old 44 Winchester rifle. He knows well that this gun is far too small to kill an elephant, but He hopes it might help scare the animal away if needed. On his way, the narrator gathers information from local Burmans. He learns that the elephant is not wild but a domesticated one that has gone must, a condition in which male elephants become aggressive due to hormonal changes. It had broken free from its chains the previous night. Unfortunately, its mahout or caretaker had gone in the wrong direction in search of it and was now a full 12 hours away. In the meantime, the elephant had gone on a rampage, destroying a bamboo hut, killing a cow, raiding fruit stalls, and even toppling municipal rubbish van. The frightened driver had barely escaped with his life. Soon the narrator reaches a poor quarter of the town, a cramped and filthy area on a steep hillside where the elephant was last seen. There he finds a Burmese sub inspector and a few Indian constables waiting. They begin questioning the residents about the elephant's whereabouts, but the answers are contradictory and confusing. Some say it went one way, others claim it went the opposite direction, and some act completely ignorant of the event. The narrator begins to suspect that the story is full of lies, or at least the elephant is nowhere nearby. Just then, loud yells pierce the confusion. An old woman emerges from behind a hut, shooing away children, and draws attention to something behind her dwelling. As the narrator rounds the corner, he is struck by a horrifying sight, a dead man lying face down in the mud. He is identified as a Dravidian coolie crushed by the elephant. The man's body is grotesquely twisted, his face smeared with mud, his teeth bared in what Orwell calls an expression of unendurable agony. The deep trench made by his body in the soft ground tells of the sheer force used against him. His back is stripped of skin, a grim testimony of the elephant's power. This chilling discovery convinces the narrator of the potential danger. He sends his orderly to borrow a more powerful elephant rifle from a nearby friend. He also sends back the pony, fearing it might panic if it senses the elephant. Within minutes, the rifle arrives along with 5 cartridges. Soon after, some locals report that the elephant is visible in the paddy fields just a few hundred yards away. As the narrator moves towards the fields, a large crowd of Burmese people trails behind him. Their interest is not out of concern for safety, they are excited, hoping for entertainment and possibly a share of the elephant's meat. To them, the prospect of the elephant being shot is a spectacle. As the narrator descends the hill with the rifle slung over his shoulder, he feels conspicuous and foolish. He has not come with the intention of killing the elephant, only to protect himself if necessary. The crowd's expectation begins to weigh on him. At the bottom of the hill, he reaches a metalled road, and just beyond it, in a wet, soggy paddy field, stands the elephant, calm, unaware of the crowd's presence. The massive creature is leisurely tearing up branches of grass cleaning them by beating them against his knees and eating quietly. It's a peaceful scene, strangely at odds with the destruction he caused. This moment marks a turning point in Orwell's essay. The external act of finding the elephant is complete, but the deeper struggle is just beginning. Orwell now stands at the crossroads of duty, expectation, and morality. In this section, Orwell masterfully builds tension through vivid details, rising action, and the gradual shift in the narrator's emotions. It's not just the story of tracking a rogue animal, it is a meditation on power, helplessness, and the pressures of colonial rule. After finding the elephant, the narrator halted on the road. As soon as he saw the elephant, he decided not to shoot him. The elephant, which had earlier gone rogue, is now calm and harmless, grazing peacefully. He did not want to shoot a working elephant, and at that distance, peacefully eating, the elephant looked no more dangerous than a cow. He thought that the elephant's attack of must was already passing off, in which case he would merely wander harmlessly about until the mahout came back and caught him. He did not in the least want to shoot him. He decided that he would watch him for a little while to make sure that he did not turn savage again and then go home. But at that moment he glanced round the crowd that had followed him. It was an immense crowd, 2,000 at the least, and growing every minute. It blocked the road for a long distance on either side. All were happy and excited over this bit of fun, all certain that the elephant was going to be shot. They were watching the narrator as they would watch a magician about to perform a trick. The narrator suddenly realized that he should have to shoot the elephant after all. The people expected it of him and he had got to do it. And it was at that moment he first grasped the hollowness, the futility of the white man's dominion in the East. He, the white man with his gun, standing in front of the unarmed native crowd, seemingly the leading actor of the piece, but in reality he was only an absurd puppet pushed to and fro by the will of the crowd behind him. He perceived in that moment that when the white man turns tyrant, it is his own freedom that he destroys. He becomes a sort of hollow, posing dummy, the conventionalized figure of a sahib. It is the condition of his rule that he shall spend his life in trying to impress the natives, and so in every crisis he has got to do what the natives expect of him. He wears a mask and his face grows to fit it. The narrator had got to shoot the elephant. A sahib has got to act like a sahib. To return without shooting the elephant was impossible. The crowd would laugh at him. Every white man's life in the East was one long struggle not to be laughed at. The narrator's dilemma is the empire's dilemma. To rule is to wear a mask, and to wear the mask is to lose oneself. The narrator watched the elephant beating his bunch of grass against his knees. It seemed to him that it would be murder to shoot him. He did not want to shoot the elephant. He had never shot an elephant and never wanted to. It is worse to kill a large animal. Alive, the elephant was worth at least 100 pounds. Dead, he would only be worth the value of his tusks, 5 pounds. But the narrator had got to act quickly. He turned to some experienced looking Burmans who had been there and asked them how the elephant had been behaving. They all said he took no notice of you if you left him alone, but he might charge if you went too close to him. A white man mustn't be frightened in front of natives. The narrator shoved the cartridges into the magazine and lay down on the road to get a better aim. A deep sigh was breathed from innumerable throats. They were going to have their bit of fun after all. The rifle was a beautiful German thing. When he pulled the trigger, he did not hear the bang, but he heard the devilish roar of glee that went up from the crowd. The elephant neither stirred nor fell. He looked stricken, shrunken, and immensely old. The frightful impact of the bullet had paralyzed him without knocking him down. He fell to his knees. Saliva was dripping from his mouth. The narrator fired again into the same spot. At the second shot, the elephant did not collapse but climbed with desperate slowness to his feet and stood weakly upright with legs and head bending. He fired a third time. The elephant knocked the last remnant of strength from his legs. As his hind legs collapsed beneath him, he seemed to tower upward like a huge rock toppling, his trunk reaching skyward like a tree. He trumpeted for the first and only time, and then he came down with a crash that seemed to shake the ground. The narrator got up. The Burmans were already racing past him across the mud. It was obvious that the elephant would never rise again, but he was not dead. His mouth was wide open. The narrator waited a long time for him to die, but his breathing did not weaken. Finally, he fired his two remaining shots into the spot where he thought his heart must be. The thick blood came out of him, but still he did not die. His body did not even jerk when the shots hit him. The tortured breathing continued without a pause. He was dying very slowly and in great agony. The narrator felt that he had got to put an end to that dread noise. It seemed dreadful to see the elephant lying there, powerless to move and yet powerless to die. He sent back for his small rifle and poured shot after shot into his heart and down his throat. This seemed to make no impression. The tortured gasps continued. The narrator could not stand it any longer and went away. He heard later that it took the elephant half an hour to die. Burmans were bringing knives and baskets even before the narrator left. They had stripped the elephant's body almost to the bones by the afternoon. Afterwards, there were endless discussions about the shooting of the elephant. The owner was furious, but he was only an Indian and could do nothing. Among the Europeans, opinion was divided. The older men said he was right. The younger men said it was a damn shame to shoot an elephant for killing a coolie because an elephant was worth more than any damn Koringi coolie. The narrator was very glad that the coolie had been killed as it gave him a sufficient pretext for shooting the elephant. He often wondered whether any of the others gasped that he had done it solely to avoid looking a fool. Thank you for watching the video.